Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. From New York City, Noor Ibrahim, Daily Beast Deputy World Editor, is with us. From Jerusalem, France 24 correspondent Irris Makler. Reporter Irris Makler is with us from Jerusalem. Reporter Rosie Collyer is with us here, documentary filmmaker. And France 24's very own Philip Turle. It's spring here in Paris, which means it's time for tennis. And the French Open tournament is back with fans. But one event upstaged it all. And a question: what are the rights and obligations when you're the highest paid female athlete in the world? The tennis world split when world number 2 Naomi Osaka announced she would skip post-match press conferences at this year's Grand Slam tournament. But when she pulled out completely, she told fans that actually it was because of self-care, that she was been suffering from bouts of depression and anxiety since 2018. Rosie Collyer, what was your reaction to this story when it first broke?
Initially, I think like a lot of people here in France just felt that because she is the highest paid player, then that she has an obligation, as you said in your introduction, to talk to the media. It's just part of being a sports person. And I think then sympathies set in with her because of her second statement. So the first statement just said that she was not going to take part in press conferences, but then the second statement that came a couple of days later, pointed directly to the fact that she's suffering from depression. And then I think the narrative completely changed. Even her, major sponsor, Nike, other sponsors, who make up a large part of her revenue, came out in support of her. So I think there was this miscommunication a little bit on her part, just sort of saying that she's not going to speak to the media. And I think for some people that resonated a little bit with Meghan Markle and Harry, obviously in the UK, that they're trying to control the kind of media narrative around them, and that got journalists' backs up, I think, the wrong way. But as I say, once the second statement came out saying, that she is suffering from a mental illness ultimately, then I see that the people's attitudes towards her, both here in France and on social media around the world, have changed, and there was empathy for her.
People's attitudes changed, and tennis is a sport that says that those post-match press conferences, the visibility it gives the sport is what makes it a success. As Rosie said, we didn't have the full picture when the week began.
Well, you know what, Francois? I feel tempted to say the following: just let her get on and play tennis and forget about the press conferences, because she's an athlete. She's not a politician. She's not someone who's media savvy. She's not a journalist like you and me. She's not used to speaking in front of the cameras and probably doesn't like speaking in front of vast amounts of people. It's a really intimidating, difficult thing to do. And I have a lot of respect for athletes who are forced to do it. It's not a choice. You have to go and do it. For years I did the Tour de France, and after every stage, the riders have to come, the yellow jersey rider and the winner of the stage have to come and do a press conference, whether they like it or not, and whether they're exhausted or not. They have to come, and they're opposite all these journalists who ask all these questions. Some of them are good, well thought out questions. Others are quite stupid, but they have to answer. And I understand it's a very difficult and intimidating thing to do. So let her play the game. Let the public see her play the game. Let her win the tournament, and we'll all be delighted for her. And leave the poor girl alone. If she's suffering from depression and she's suffering from anxiety, then she should be allowed not to attend this press conference. What the bottom line here is that I think that the authorities are worried about is if they let her get away with it, Naomi Osaka, then others are going to say, well, I don't want to do it either, and all their press conference, their daily press conference, will no longer take place, or only a few people who want to do it will agree to take part in these press conferences. And I think that is the underlying fear amongst the organisers. There's not much in there which I think is based on, well, what's this poor person thinking about, and do they have a problem with talking in public?
But they do. But she has changed the conversation, Irris Makler, because we've heard the heads of the Grand Slam tournaments who've come out after her statement and recognized that, they're going to sit down and think of ways to address the mental strain that these top-level athletes face, something they said they hadn't done before.
During all this story, I went back and watched her winning the US Open, standing next to Serena Williams, the whole crowd booing her. She was in tears. She's pulling her visor down over her eyes. I hadn't seen it before, and it's so affecting. And if you had anxiety anyhow, I can see how you wouldn't want to be talking in public after an experience like that, with Serena Williams having to put her arm around her to stop that crowd from tearing her apart. So I can see her mental health issues. And it's also quite interesting, you have to speak to the public. That's required. But you can't speak about anything political. That's not allowed. So you can't take the knee and you can't talk about Black Lives Matter. You can only speak about what you're allowed to speak about. And this young woman doesn't want to do that. And I respect that. And I think she has changed the conversation. And I think for the better. And I think Philip Turle is right. They're not worried about her necessarily. They're worried about everybody turning it on its head, especially now that if you're on Twitter, you don't need to go. You can still communicate with your fans. You don't need the press conference. The press conference and Roland Garros and the matches need you.
Yeah, and you mentioned that 2018 U.S. Open final. At the time, Naomi Osaka is 20 years old, her first Grand Slam win. As you said, Serena, after having that confrontation with the chair umpire, was furious. There was booing during the awards ceremony. This time, 3 years later, Serena once again fully behind Naomi Osaka.
I feel for Naomi. I feel like I wish I could give her a hug because I know what it's like. Like I said, I've been in those positions. We have different personalities, and people are different. Not everyone is the same. I'm thick, other people are thin. So everyone is different and everyone handles things differently.
Everyone handles things differently. Noor Ibrahim, Naomi Osaka is a star. And that's the other perhaps added layer of pressure that's upon her. She has spoken out on issues like Black Lives Matter.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it really speaks to the generational divide that we're seeing with these younger athletes. And I also think it's time to recognize that, we have a lot of conversations about destigmatizing mental health issues and talking about those things and having open conversations about it. But the fact is it needs to translate to action sometimes. And that requires certain compromises and sacrifices. So it's about not just, talking the talk and actually realizing that you have to walk it as well. And like I said, I don't think that she needs it either. We mentioned the Twitter thing, but it used to be that these press conferences were so necessary for athletes to remain relevant, for them to maintain their fan bases too. But at this point, I think people are paying a lot more attention to their social media pages and connecting that way. So, yeah, I just don't think, I think if you're invested in the athlete, if they inspire you, then this shouldn't be something that really bothers you.
Rosie Collyer?
Yeah, I thought also what was interesting about her second statement, François, is that, she spoke about really wanting to help others, clearly suffering from depression. And that was a similar narrative that she took last year in the whole Black Lives Matter, if you remember, during her competition. She'd wear, masks with the names of, different victims of police violence in America. Although she, didn't speak out herself, powerfully on the matter. It was more symbolism for her, and I think that's a big part of her. She's young; she's still just 23 years old, I believe. But as she sort of develops an identity, develops her personality, then she's clearly wanting to sort of take the role of as a pioneer, but also as a helper and a voice for people who. Don't have the same stage that she has. So I think it's an interesting evolution that she's going through since just last year.
And she's going to have perhaps more pressure. I know that she has withdrawn from the first grass court tournament in Berlin ahead of Wimbledon in a couple of weeks' time. She might be carrying a nation's hopes during the Summer Olympics.